Dopamine swipe, dopamine swipe. Followers, likes, double tap. Now they control your life.
What is going on, beautiful people? Welcome back to the 817 podcast, where we talk about the lovely city of Fort Worth, Texas. We get into politics, business, culture, news. If it impacts you as a Fort Worthian, we discuss it. We do 3 short stories, 1 big story, and wins and losses every week. I'm with my great co-host, Aunt Zeta, who's dressed up nice and spiffy because she's always going somewhere to change lives.
I try. I was trying to dress less spiffy, and my husband told me that I looked too casual, and so I had to put on a blazer.
But it's cool, and I'm glad you're going. She's going to an event that I'm sure we're going to cover eventually at some kind of capacity.
Yeah, last week we talked about the article that touched on whether literacy is a civil right. And tonight is a panel discussion on that topic. The Star-Telegram and various other folks are hosting at the Botanic Gardens. It'll be past by the time you hear this podcast, but hopefully, since it's being live streamed, I would assume the Star-Telegram is going to be having a recording available if you missed it.
Yep. And there will be a lot of important players there. Obviously, also the Sunday paper for Star-Telegram made this the topic. So there is a lot of institutional collaboration around this messaging to light a fire under us to really get excited to do something about it. Obviously, we're going to also talk about other things around education today, as we have some updates about the superintendent journey and the resignation and what's next there. But let's first go ahead and dive into a topic we brought up last week, and that was mercy culture. And the tough thing about Mercy Culture Church, for me and Ann, we noticed that a lot of you love this topic. And when we talk about this topic, you guys listen. Even though for me and Ann, it's not our favorite topic to discuss, but we do have to make sure somebody's keeping this church accountable for all the things they have going. Last week, we talked about how they called out Mayor Maddie Parker. We also have a snippet of that church having their call to action for the audience. I'm going to play that for you as well. This snippet is roughly 2 to 4 minutes, depending on how much I want to show you guys. The link will also be in the description if you want to watch the whole kind of 12-minute riff about their perspective of what's happening with their zoning issue with the city.
And your church has been resisted by the city of Fort Worth, by governmental leaders, and by agitators in this city. And today is a new day. Today is a day that the church will be bold. Heather, tell them what happened.
So this morning, I'm sharing with you the update and the timeline of what we have been through. For those of you in the room that don't know what the Justice Residence is, years ago, the Lord spoke to the leadership of Mercy Culture to build what we call the Justice Residence. The Justice Residence is a ministry that will be a place of restoration and discipleship for survivors of sex trafficking. The Fort Worth Zoning Commission, led by LaShondra Stringfellow, has lied and manipulated by trying to strong-arm us into rezoning our property. Why would she do this? Because in a 2004 city ordinance, our 17-acre property was zoned to be used for all church-related activities. And the city of Fort Worth and the zoning committee, let me make this clear, does not determine what those activities are. The Bible does.
We will not be silent. We will not be bullied. And hear me today, we will not be stopped. We will exercise our First Amendment rights and freedom of speech. We will exercise our constitutional rights of freedom of religion. Mercy Culture has the legal right, whether it's under the Constitution or the Texas Constitution or even under the Fort Worth City ordinances that specifically governs our 17 acres of property to build this residence. And we are prepared to exercise and defend our rights, even if it means seeking justice through the court system. Church, the time to act is now.
So as you can see here, what we're dealing with is post this event with this church, what you now have is that Mercy Culture is now feeling like they are celebrating and they're making progress because now they are going to be before the Fort Worth Zoning Commission in November. So a little bit update, Mercy Culture believes that they should have a human trafficking victim shelter for 100 beds to be able to also get them religiously involved with their church and them being followers of their version of Christ. And again, this all comes after a meeting with Mayor Maddie Parker, which I imagine happened because Nathan Scatzline, who's a state rep, this seems like really close access to the mayor. And I've heard through the grapevine that this meeting was an actual meeting between the two, and that with the sending of emails that the church called to action for the audience, there is a lot of noise happening that a church this size gets to do. And so anyways, lucky for us, we have a former city council member here.
And zoning commissioner.
And zoning commissioner who can tell us where do we need to be concerned? What do we need to be watching for? And if there's any kind of things we all just need to maybe even be mobilizing within ourselves to make sure something like this doesn't hurt the fabric of Fort Worth.
Yeah, I think that in the first article, they talked about how they didn't believe that they needed to go for a zoning change because this was a church activity. And I think that churches are allowed in all zoning categories without needing to change their zoning to be a church or a community facility or some such use as that. But what you include in church activities, I don't think can be as wide open as basically anything that a church decides to get itself involved in. And I'm sure that there are other churches that believe differently than this church does, that if they were wanting to do certain activities, that members of this church might have some concerns about that. They stated originally that they didn't believe they had to go for a zoning change and that they were not going to go for a zoning change because this is a church activity and they didn't see the need to do that. Then they claim in their social media after having this meeting with the mayor that they have been given approval to go before the zoning commission on November 13th. Any property owner can apply for a zoning change. So you don't go to the mayor to get approval to go get a zoning change. It seems to me that the staff told them they needed a zoning change. They didn't want a zoning change. They tried to maybe go to the mayor to not have to go through a zoning change and were told they need to get a zoning change. So now they're going to the zoning commission.
And so you're saying they're basically trying to make this like a celebratory achievement when really it's just anyone can go get.
Yeah, they're saying they received approval to go before the zoning commission. Any property owner can apply for a zoning change. They might talk to staff and staff might warn them that what they're asking for is incompatible with the surrounding land use and inconsistent with the comprehensive plan, which are the things that the zoning commission is tasked with considering when making their recommendations to the city council. What happens at the zoning commission meeting, in my opinion, as a former zoning commissioner and as a certified city planner, needs to be based on sound planning principles where they make those decisions, not because a whole bunch of people show up at a meeting to say what they should do, but because they look at a staff report, they look at the surrounding land uses, they look at our long-range comprehensive plan, and they say whether this fits into that long-range plan and whether it's compatible with the surrounding land uses. And then they make a recommendation to the council. At that point, it goes to the council. And in my opinion, as a former council member, I think that council members should be making decisions based on sound planning principles as well and not loud voices in the room. But it does tend to get a little bit more political at that point, where if a bunch of constituents show up with an opinion about a zoning case, that those kind of things tend to sway council members.
Yeah. And so there's so much here that I feel like is going to be an ongoing story, unfortunately, for us. But I'm just like, where is the idea of like human trafficking and that issue is a health issue, and churches are not certified to be giving health and medical advice to people. So I'm just like, where is even like the amount of confidence or belief that you even should be the people responsible to be running a sex trafficking clinic? It's just like the lack of clarity. This should be something that just off of record of, wait, you guys aren't qualified. Who is here certified to handle anything around this situation from a clinical perspective, from psychology, all the pieces that come into place. You're just going to have this random church be able to decide who these people are. And if you listen into that video I showed you, she clearly says to then to save them to become followers of Christ. Like, she didn't just say to help these people and then let them live with whoever they want to be. It is, oh yeah, we have 100 beds, so we can take these sex trafficking victims and then turn them into followers of Christ. So, I mean,
they believe that's the solution to the trauma that they've experienced. But I agree with you. I have serious concerns about. I applaud people of faith who go and try to make the world a better place and give their time and talent and service to try to help folks who have experienced trauma. But I 100% agree with you that they should not be taking on these roles as experts in areas that clearly need expertise. So while in the past, when this zoning request came up or this use of the land in this area came up, there was some concern about traffic and parking and that sort of thing. I think those things still apply because I think that this is a use beyond what one would typically think would happen on church property. I think that the expertise element is the most concerning to me.
Let's play what kind of happened here based off of just experience. And here's where my fear is. It goes to the zoning committee. If the zoning committee stays responsible to
sound planning principles, it would go nowhere. And saying, hey, it would be done. But then they could maybe have enough of pressure to make it get on the council? It always goes to the council.
Always,
the zoning commission is a recommending body to the council. So the process is that you apply to the zoning commission. They make a recommendation to the council. They can do that in one meeting. They can say, we need you to go talk to more residents. Like what often has been happening lately is that people have not talked to neighbors and that sort of thing. And the zoning commission knows that the city council doesn't like it when that stuff doesn't happen. And so they've often told people who haven't done a lot of outreach and brought back documentation that they have gotten input from a variety of stakeholders. They have suggested that we're going to continue this case and have you come back before us again and show us that you have, with documentation that you have done your due diligence. I think that, like I said, it should be based at the zoning commission on sound planning principles. The staff makes a report as to whether it's compatible and consistent. And if they're going to do something other than what the staff report says, they usually need to give reasons why, so that there's some record as to why the decision was made for that recommendation. Then it automatically goes to the city council, regardless of what the recommendation is. If the zoning commission recommends for denial, it still goes to the council. The council can approve it over the recommendation of denial, or they can uphold the recommendation of denial and deny it themselves. But it's always a two-step process with 2 public meetings.
So I think where this gets difficult is that if this gets approved, that would obviously be bad in a lot of reasons, and clearly the extremist Christian nationalist kind of energy has some type of ear and pull to the city. Problem number 2, let's say sound principles, we're able to look at these people in the eyes and be like, sorry, you just don't dot I's and cross T's the way society works. This is how democracy works. The attacking on the next following election of the mayor, of other people, watching their little sermon thing just now, they obviously are skillful at playing piano, getting people emotionally aroused, and saying that the city are demons, and how can you be the people against helping people in sex slavery? This creates, we're in an epicenter of a very complex situation. And I believe, unfortunately, that this could become a bigger story, and we're talking a big, big conversation. That me and you're going to be talking about this for a very long time.
I think it could be a bigger conversation just because they may have an argument about what they think churches should be able to do. And I'm not sure. I would have to go do some research into the legalities of this and whether there's precedent. I think that there are churches that have daycares, there are churches that have schools, and there was a school on this property as well. So I just don't know how far that goes. And like I said, there's going to be other churches that maybe, different groups don't agree with what they're trying to do, that might be opposed to something that they would want to do on church property.
Yeah.
So I struggle a little bit because I'm constantly, when I was on council, I was always of the mind that I didn't want anybody to come to me and say that they'd gotten my approval of something that they were planning to take through the process of going to the zoning commission and then going to the city council, because there's 2 public hearings that need to be held. And that needs to happen before a full record of what is being asked to happen, whether it's compatible and consistent, public input at 2 public meetings, all need to occur before anybody makes up their mind 100% as to what is the correct outcome of all of this.
Yeah. Well, I just want to see what happens and continue to explore. This was a Star Telegram article by a friend of the pod, Harrison Mantis, and we'll just keep updating the reporting. I just think this is something all pod listeners, people who live in Oakhurst, shout out to JKM for sending the video, one of our listeners. And we'll go ahead and move into story number 2, which also, this one was a hot topic. I mean, this next topic got my wife out to happy hour to talk about this topic, and that is Fort Worth ISD's former superintendent to continue to get compensation post-resignation over $500,000. So Fort Worth ISD will pay former superintendent Angelica Ramsey $544,463 to buy out her contract according to her exit agreement with the school board. The 12-page agreement obtained by the Fort Worth Report through an open record request outlines that the district will pay Ramsey 2 major lump sum payments and set aside retirement funds for her. It also details the educator's new role as the district's public relations ambassador, and she will immediately be placed on leave with full salary and benefits. Ramsey is 3rd consecutive Fort Worth ISD superintendent the school board has bought out of a contract. Her predecessor, Kent Scribner, received $574,000 in 2022, and Walter Dansby got $892,000 upon his departure in 2014. So I know this is firing up a lot of people. I know it's crazy. I know it's hard to fathom. We're talking about teachers who we don't pay enough. We talk about schools that don't have enough AC systems or HVAC systems or
nutritious food.
Nutritious food, clean cafeterias, theaters or auditoriums so they can have plays, high quality athletic facilities, and $500,000 payouts go to people who were there for 2 years. So I know you have teacher friends. I know you've also sent me some of these stories. What is your kind of take? Like, how do we navigate this?
I mean, apparently this is a common practice.
Yes.
I think I've read stories in other cities, and I think there was actually just some in Chicago. I think the entire school board resigned, and the city is now appointing a whole new school board in Chicago. I just saw that on the news yesterday, I think. So I don't know if this has been ongoing for many years. In our case, Dansbury was before any of the kind of attack on school boards started happening from, people coming down and complaining about woke agendas and all that, making service on the school board and being a superintendent kind of a charged environment. Navigating through the pandemic, I think, didn't help things. And we continue to have folks pointing out what they believe are shortcomings and what I guess data shows in some cases are shortcomings within our district. And I think that this is all kind of coming together. And I think you mentioned that tonight, which will be passed by the time this drops on Monday, there's this panel discussion about kind of the future of Fort Worth ISD and literacy and whether literacy is a civil right. So my hope is that this all lands somewhere where we have some things to do so that we can do something and not just continue to complain about what is not being done and what is not being successful. There's also a petition circulating, which I'll send to you as well, that is from a group of parents who see some of the things that they have been doing in their own schools to support those schools, and they have seen the quality of education improving in those schools. And they're not only focusing on their schools in neighborhoods where they have the wherewithal and the ability to have robust PTAs, but they are also reaching out and supporting schools that they know struggle in that area, in areas of the city that don't have kind of the same level of resources and, I guess, taxable income and all of the things that kind of help those schools be more successful. I think that when Scribner was here, there was some attempt to do some redistricting, which is also a really touchy subject for a lot of people, because if your attendance is based on the neighborhood you live in and you purchased a home in a neighborhood thinking you were going to go to a certain school, and then to balance things out and make schools function the way they're supposed to function, somebody comes in and wants to redraw a line that makes you go to another school. My goal would be for all the schools to be so good that we don't just have certain neighborhoods that have good schools to choose from, where not everybody can afford to live.
Yeah. Yeah, and I can put a stamp of confirmation. I know districts that I have done work with where they were paying 3 superintendents because people have left so quickly that they were paying 3 superintendents in one school year. And so it's one, I'd be interested to know how this journey started, where the superintendent got these kind of benefits. I mean, the only people who kind of get these benefits outside of superintendents are like CEOs of large companies, plus like athletes in the NFL or the NBA who get these guaranteed contracts. I don't know the history of how the super powerful got to get their compensation, even if they don't have work to credit for it. I don't know where that was started, but I, as a nerd in this stuff, would be very interested if anyone knew of a book or had some type of story about how we got here in the first place where this is allowed. Again, I think superintendents don't get paid enough for the day-to-day because it's a full-time. I mean, again, right, Fort Worth ISD is a revenued, like it's a company. It's $1 billion budget. And so these CEOs, compared to people who run $1 billion for-profit entity, is making 10x what they're making. So plus they're being held at massive accountability standards that are like humans, where others are being, the Domino's CEOs getting measured by how many pizzas we're selling. Pizzas are the same in South Dakota all the way to Florida. But kids, I mean, each and every one needs a personal journey, have different types of barriers and inequalities. And so it's just a tough job. And then everybody is on them. So I don't know. I think this is overhype. I think everyone needs to calm down and, I'd rather spend this energy on the mercy culture thing or spend our energy on the civil rights kind of discussion. This could be also why people say public schools need to go, because if you don't fix stuff like this, you're going to continue to have people have no faith in public education. How can I get people to have faith in the public education system when they just saw someone walk out with $500,000 for leaving early? So I don't know. This just is bureaucracy at its finest, power at its finest, and those who suffer are those who have to just live within the environments they were born into.
And there's a second article entitled, "As Fort Worth ISD's Superintendent Search Approaches, Here's What Lawyers Say to Expect." And it's just basically talking about how there's an interim superintendent could probably be appointed, I guess, today as we are recording, October 8th. And in the meantime, there is team leadership that is managing the day-to-day operations, and they're finalizing their next steps for what the district leadership transition will be. How long could this search last, and whether or not people might shy away from applying for this job based on the struggles that the past 2 superintendents have had running the district. They're saying that they don't think that that's going to be the case, that they're not going to have any trouble getting applicants due to the timing of the opening. Applicants will most likely be in other superintendent positions currently, and that's why there's a confidentiality situation for anybody that applies. You don't know, none of us will know who they are until the end, I guess, because if you're already at a job, you don't really want your current employer to know that you're looking for another job.
Yeah, and that is something that is the in and out that happens in schools is everyone's looking for the next opportunity. I don't think finding Fort Worth ISD from a compensation perspective. I mean, the stress part, I agree. Like, I don't know why someone would want this role unless you like. To me, if you're like a true Fort Worthian who went to school here, who like lives here, who like you already are doing the work as a like assistant soup or person, like, and you believe like I think Fort Worth needs that. Fort Worth is only going to allow this to be fixed by someone from Fort Worth. I think we have too much pride and ego in our head, and I don't even think I just think like most of Fort Worth does that. It's find the psychology to make everyone feel like we're doing great at something. And as long as we're all friends and from the same area and we go to the same events, we'll start saying, this is going great. And so currently we have an outsider running the district, and we're just really.
Well, I mean, some of that criticism in the beginning was she didn't understand the culture of Fort Worth.
Yeah.
And I thought we'd kind of moved away from that and realized that people might be doing innovative things elsewhere that we might avail ourselves of. I think that hopefully there is a strong candidate locally if that is something that needs to be a part of the equation.
And we're also like, we're just in a confusing part in education. You were bringing this up earlier where it's like, I don't even know where the good guys are anymore. Like, I don't even know who's doing the real stuff. Like, I even just think like there was another article, top 5 schools in Texas. And South Lake was number 1, number 3. The same South Lake that if you go anywhere in America and you say, I live in Dallas, Fort Worth. Oh, I heard about that one district that bans books and wants you guys to put up the 10 Commandments, who has their own national show. How does the school district that has a national show about them being crazy is then also ranked as a top school to go to in Texas? It just like, this is where the game is like, what are we measuring? Like, how are we, like, what's good? Like, how it's so
not
difficult.
To mention what I said previously before we started recording about not knowing who the good guys are. There's this whole attack at the national level and state level for sure against public schools, where they're very much aligned in trying to get vouchers passed and failed 3 times, I think, coming back in special sessions. But then some of those folks got primaried, and those primary challengers won. And from everything that I've read, our governor has the votes he needs to move forward with vouchers. And so if that happens, I'm not sure what's going to happen to our public schools. And I hope that I am incorrect in that. I hope that our public schools can get the support that they need and have all of us who are raising concerns now and saying that we're unhappy and with the outcomes and results of what has been in place for all these years, and can figure out a way to support schools, not just complain about the outcomes.
Yeah. Well, we're going to go ahead and move into short story number 3. Short story number 3 is also a follow-up of things we've been keeping tabs on. This is the Anthony Johnson case. Again, I highly recommend you guys listen to Anthony Johnson's sisters on the 817 pod about a month ago. Powerful testimonial about their brother who got murdered and killed in the jail. Someone was on his back from their knee. And there's a lot of other players looking to be now getting a part of the case.
So it's a KERA news article entitled 15 Tarrant County jailers now named in the Anthony Johnson Jr. wrongful death lawsuit. 10 more Tarrant County jailers have been added Monday to a lawsuit filed by the family of Anthony Johnson Jr., who died in Tarrant County custody in April, making the total number of 15 people now named in the wrongful death suit. The suit initially named a former detention officer and his supervisor, along with up to 10 unnamed detention officers listed as John Doe, as responsible for Johnson's April 21st death. Now the court filings on Monday list a total of 15 people, alleging each failed to intervene, and they list the folks in this article. The attorney information for the 10 additional detention officers has not been made available yet, the defense attorneys for them. And KERA News reached out to the sheriff's office to confirm if officers were still employed, and will update this story when they receive a response. So apparently they haven't received a response. So I think Johnson's family attorney said that they plan to take this case to trial unless something just crazy happens.
There's been 64 inmate deaths since Bill Wayborn has taken the mantle as sheriff. And again, this is a constant not being responsive to the news, not being responsible to questions. But you also have other families. A family, I don't know if you saw this one. I know we didn't talk about it before, but mother of a woman who died in Tarrant County Jail brings daughter's ashes to the commissioner's meeting. This was a family, friends, and supporters of Chastity Bonner. And then you also saw, I know Alyssa Simmons, Commissioner Simmons, has gotten even her own letter out talking about there has to be more done here. We have to, a lot has to be changing here. So this is another thing. When I go to, hey, all this energy about superintendent's dollars, no, I need you to bring it over here. I need this to be the thing we're talking about in the bar or with our families is how are we allowing our Tarrant County jails to be ran by poor leadership that allows people to die, that doesn't have to hold accountability? And we have a leader in the seat saying we have to do more to keep these people accountable. Commissioner Simmons said on talking about the Chastity Bonner story that another heartbreaking story from families of those who lost loved ones in our county jail remind us why we must work tirelessly for accountability, transparency, and reform in our jails. This is why I do the work to fight for justice, protect our community, and strive for a system that serves us all. We can't not keep going like this. And that's again why I think we continue to remind us. I know it might feel exhausting, but there's a lot happening here. You're talking about to give perspective, right? Like Mercy Culture is talking about the largest clinic for sex traffic victims at 100. You know what they could use that actually for? Is the families who have 64 people who've passed away in Bill Wayborn's care. All right? Like, we talk about those things as like, we need to care about sex trafficking, which I'm not saying we don't. But we look at the dollars, we look at the energy, we look at, we have to do all of those things. Yet at the same time, just here locally, there is 64 families who have people who've passed away since 2017 in our jails. And so, let's go make a clinic for that. Something more localized.
Or let's have our county take care of the people who are mentally unwell.
Yeah.
So they don't end up in jail.
Yeah, that sounds great too. So anyways, again, a lot of what I try to, like, why I love doing this pod is because I'm trying to balance, like, where do we put our emotion and what fires us up in the news? And then what's really, really important and what we're not seeing that should fire us up more. And I think that's ultimately what I love to try to do for myself and on this pod to, like, where do we focus this energy? Because there's a lot of things we could care about. So we're going to move on to the big story. The big story, is a lot of mixture of different stories. We're going to have a lot of opinions. You all will have a lot of opinions and conversations about this as well. Is Colin Allred and Ted Cruz were both in Tarrant County last Saturday. And we weren't able to talk about it last week because we recorded on Wednesday of last week. And so now we're going to talk about it this week because we're recording on Tuesday. And so obviously I'm sure the election cycle is going to continue rolling and being a discussion. So we thought this was a good time to talk about their visits, what was discussed, and some of the movers and shakers and how they're operating within this election cycle.
So the first article is a Fort Worth Star-Telegram article entitled Allred Cruz Fling Barbs from Opposite Ends of Tarrant County a Month Before Election Day. And it's two Fort Worth Star-Telegram reporters, Harrison Mantis and Lily Davidson. But Senator Cruz and Representative Colin Allred squared off on opposite sides of Tarrant County on Saturday ahead of their in-person debate, which is going to be on October 15th. Allred held an afternoon event at a music venue near downtown Fort Worth, while Cruz parked his tour bus in the evening outside of a barbecue restaurant in Keller. The rallies come as campaigns enter their final stretch towards Election Day, which is on November 5th. Cruz is seeking his third term, while Allred is seeking to become the first Democrat elected statewide in Texas in 30 years. Some of the things that they're talking about are reproductive issues, reproductive rights, voters' rights, and the protection of democracy took place on the stage at Allred's downtown event. And Dallas County Democrats also centered his policy. The Dallas County Democrat also centered his message on the need to defeat Cruz in November. There were lots of representatives that also joined in on that. And one surprise person who showed up at that and made remarks was former Tarrant County Judge Glenn Whitley, who announced his endorsement of Allred at the rally.
And also, you had at Cruz's Bo French. Sorry. I like the other name, but Bo French, who came, who came and said, I thought you also had Manny Ramirez there and all that jazz. But I mean, you had Bo French coming on talking about Tarrant County is in a precarious position. He referenced how Democrats at the top of the ticket won the county in 2018 and 2020 and noted its rapid growth over the past few years. Quote, I'm going to tell you, we have a lot to work to do. Close quote. Senator Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and the communists have their target set on Tarrant County, Ted Cruz said. They can't have it, he said. So, two very different languages. Glenn Whitley, on the other hand, long life Republican, retired from as the commissioner, talked about how he is supporting not only Colin Allred, but also Kamala Harris. And again, this is what should be happening more in Tarrant County, because there's a clear person who should be serving us and who services themselves, both as president and as senator. But let's kind of dive into the importance of Tarrant County and what are the real odds of, Democrats getting some type of progress here. I know you often say we get our hopes up and then we, get deflated once results get here. What do you kind of have to say with, I guess you didn't get asked or attended the Colin Allred event. We were out of town. So
no, I actually did have several people bring it to my attention. There was another, he actually had a couple of events here and I knew about both of them. And I had a very busy Saturday and did not make it over to the event, but had a little fear of missing out afterwards when I saw a lot of people I know who attended after the fact, sharing the excitement on social media, the line around the block, the various folks that were there speaking and all of that. It ties into a Texas Monthly article that I sent you also saying, why are national progressives campaigning in Texas? And I think that does tie back to your question about what is happening in Tarrant County and whether or not Tarrant County is purple instead of red. I think that in 2020, there was some visits from the national ticket that came through Fort Worth, and I think that that's continuing to happen. So I guess, though, this article says that the Harris campaign hasn't spent money campaigning in Texas, but they have come to pick up a check. They did have an event here locally that Senator Mark Kelly attended. So I guess they say that in the past, history has suggested that there's not much of a chance of winning here because, as I said previously, the last Democrat to claim Texas was Jimmy Carter, which was nearly 50 years ago.
Yeah. And when they talk about Wendy Davis running for governor, that was a 21% difference.
Yeah.
The challenge thing is the Trump era. To me, you're seeing that, from the Wendy Davis Abbott, right? Now you go to kind of today in a Trump world. Now it's closer to 10%, 5% for a lot of these tough races. Because maybe there are more people in the Glenn Whitley worlds. I think you have a lot of Ted Cruz blows off the Liz Cheneys and Whitleys, but I wonder if they do actually make an impression. Do they make an impression on people in Texas?
Are there people who are just not being as vocal that agree with them?
Yeah.
Because that was something that came up on a podcast, the Y'all-itics podcast, I think it was, or maybe it was one of the TV shows where they interviewed Whitley, and he was saying that he thought more folks were going to vote in the voting box when they were there on their own.
Yeah.
In the same way he's publicly stating that he's going to vote.
Yeah. Yeah. That Texas State podcast that come from the guys out of Houston, they do a great show. I know they talk about it as well. And I think when I was listening to it, they also said the difference between Ted Cruz in 2018 and Ted Cruz now is 3 million more people live in Texas. Connecticut basically has showed up to Texas. And so, Dan Patrick and Abbott are constantly talking about, all these Californians are moving here to Texas because Texas is better. But then if that's the case, eventually those people's politics and ideas are going to change. That article where you talked about progressives showing up, AOC was here, Bernie Sanders were here. They showed up in San Antonio. A lot of what they're showcasing too is that getting young people involved and using a lot of practice of messaging so that they can see what works. So they're using Texas as a stopping ground to see what really connects with young people. So they're bringing their most progressive people to a state that they don't have a high chance of winning, but they can test a lot because there's a lot of youthful energy and excitement in Texas. But another thing I'd be interested to learn as well is not only the excitement with the people in Texas, but I wonder if Texas gives more money to politicians, because we know that there's really nothing we can do in the state of Texas to serve you, at least in our brain. So maybe we can give you money to win in other areas. And so, Texas, like in a lot of ways, funds a lot of other races for them, states for them.
Yeah, I think the other podcast that you were referring to is called Texas Take.
Correct, Texas Take, which is a great one as well. One I really like to listen to. Cool. We only have, less than a month away until election. Do we see more of this happening? What kind of, what would you kind of say overall when you talk to friends, people about this race and things that you are looking forward to?
I mean, if we're just talking about the Colin Allred Cruz case, I know that this is very anecdotal, but my neighbor who's had a Harris Wall sign in her yard now has had 2 of them stolen. So I'm not sure what that says, but I think it's petty and people should leave other people's property alone. It's very annoying. I just believe in democracy, and I think that everybody should educate themselves and vote. This podcast coming up on an election has gotten a little more political than I've ever been in my entire life publicly, just because the seat I sat in for so many years was a nonpartisan seat. And I think that the things that are concerning to me are people who just didn't learn what we all were supposedly supposed to learn in kindergarten, and that is how to play well with others. I think that regardless of where your beliefs are and what you think is good for yourselves, that thing that you come back to over and over and over again about how what is good for the we and not just the me.
Where, there's a lot of virality around, what's her name? Marjorie Taylor Greenwood saying they control the weather. I thought that was funny because she used they. There's no such thing as they. There's only we, humans. We, humans, have to figure this out.
About like making hurricanes hit certain things?
Yeah. She's it's hot on the X today, but anyways, yeah, she's not a weir, she's a there. So this is a couple reasons. Again, I was telling you I was confident about this upcoming election. You can't do that, EJ. You're gonna get comfortable, but it's right in 2016. I can share that I did not vote.
Ugh.
I can share.
So
I was
disappointed.
But I'm 26 at the time.
26. That's a grown adult, EJ. That's not an excuse. You're out of college, grown adult.
Yeah. Wait. No. I was 26. Yeah, I think I was 26. Anyways, the part here is I voted since I was 18, and I think like most people, we're like, oh, it's the big time Chicago Bulls versus the JV Alamo Heights team, and you thought there was no way Trump-Hillary was even a battle. And when you look at the voting, 20 million people didn't vote in that election. When you now look past that, you add those 20 million people, we're doing that naturally. So that is before now you're dealing with the Glenn Whitley situation. And I think there's three types of this kind of Trump effect, right? You're going to have the Glenn Whitleys who are going to say, hey, enough is enough. I'm actually going to vote for Democrats. I don't know how. We're going to find out. I'm excited to figure out how many of those will we have. The other number two will be, if you don't see it in that bucket, you're going to see it in the bucket, I'm just not going to vote. And then the third one is going to be like, okay, how many people are really just, they clearly still voted for the guy. Which then that would make me really depressed if option 3 happened. I'm okay if you're an option 2-er, honestly. If you're someone who just like, yeah, I'm not going to vote.
I would appreciate it if they would go vote down ballot. If they can't bring themselves to vote in the presidential race, there are down ballot races. And I am one who always is annoyed with people who don't go all the way down the ballot, because people put a lot of effort and energy into putting their name on a ballot, campaigning, and to have very low turnout and have people just not bother to do their research and learn about the candidates and vote. I would encourage everybody to go vote. If you can't bring yourself to vote in a certain election on that ballot, then, so be it. If you don't know enough about a ballot or an election on that ballot, so be it. But don't just not vote totally.
And speaking of voting on the ballot, didn't we have basically a ton of Democrats from the area wrote a letter to the federal government basically saying, we need you to look into what's happening. Voter suppression in Texas. I mean, we had Mark Vesey write something, Nicole Collier.
Again, it's that whole thing of it's not going to benefit us if more people vote, and therefore we're about lessening the number of polling places, making it harder to vote, purging the rolls of people who haven't voted, which they didn't purge my children, and neither of them have voted in a Texas election in quite some time. So I'm not sure who's getting purged, but I think that
basically it says, like, Dear Assistant Attorney General Clark, we write to formally request your office exercise its authority to monitor the state of Texas action affecting the constitutional voting right and federal civil rights in 5 most populous counties, Harris, Dallas, Tarrant, Bexar, and Travis, through the 2024 early vote period, October 21 to November 1, and November 5th general election. Recent actions by Texas Governor Greg Abbott and Attorney General Ken Paxton have increased the urgency for federal election monitors in our state, while the Texas legislature has increased the barriers to vote since 2013 Shelby County versus Holder decision in recent months. States leaders in Austin have accelerated attacks on rights to vote. And this is studies have revealed that the state of Texas has repeatedly taken steps to restrict voter turnout. This is not a coincidence, not based on factual claims or voter fraud, which we've also shown that there's been no voter fraud in Tarrant County. As the largest majority state under total conservative control, Texas voters, particularly minority voters, are constantly under attack for merely attempting to exercise their right. Let me say that again. The largest majority state under total conservative control.
It was interesting that the last day to register to vote was Monday, and people were still reminding everyone about how challenging it is to register. Like, you can go online and you can do all these things that make it feel like you've registered, but then at the bottom you have to print that thing out and take it to somebody and hand it to them or mail it to them.
Yeah.
That just seems insane in this day and age.
Yeah. So
some states have election day registration capability.
We're not one of those states.
No, we are not.
Guys, we have a very sad hand today on this episode. I'm just letting you guys know.
I'm trying not to be sad, but I swear, EJ brought me down today for sure.
I know, like it's not awesome, but the journey of being on this podcast is hard because
it'll be interesting if we're able to get away from politics at all, because we've got this election in November and then we're going to have a municipal election in May.
But I always tell you, everything is politics. Everything is politics. And I think,
I've said that too. I've said I thought I would be able to get away from politics or things being political when I was no longer in office. And I agree with you. There's politics in pretty much everything.
Yeah. Well, I know next segment we usually do wins and losses, but since we just given you a ton of what feels like losses in several different formats, we're going to give you just updates on some events coming up so that you can get active and more engaged in the city.
So I think I brought in the last podcast to everyone's attention some summits that the staff at the City of Fort Worth were working on to allow people to give input on the comprehensive plan, which is the plan for 2050, which is called Reimagine Fort Worth. And on the city's website that is called Connect Fort Worth, if you Google Connect Fort Worth, it will take you to that website. There are multiple opportunities to learn about those engagement meetings that are being held. And I attended the first one of this round last night and found 5 tables full of 8 to 10 people each, immersed in hands-on activity, looking at land uses and what they want to see in their neighborhoods and giving feedback as to what they would like Fort Worth to look like in 2050. And then today I attended the technical committee on which I serve, where we continue to talk about those engagement things that are happening throughout the rest of this week. By the time you hear this podcast, those specific engagements will be passed, but there will be online opportunities to do those engagements, and there will be what is called meeting in a box, where some of those hands-on design your neighborhood, show what is important to you, what priorities you would like to see, will be available to you to check out, to take to groups that you might be involved in. They are really trying to meet with younger folks, school-age people, the people who will actually be alive and thriving in 2050. And so all of that will be available on the city's website, Connect Fort Worth. And there are some engagement meetings coming up on the Move a Million plan that are starting the week of October 19th. And the link to those are available on the Move a Million website, which I will send to EJ to put in the show notes. There's a link to it on the Connect Fort Worth website as well, but that takes 2 clicks, and it might be easier if we just provide people the direct click. But there'll be multiple meetings for that week of October 19th for that Move a Million engagement, and the city has taken a step that was encouraged by many of us to combine these engagements so that everybody's not out having all of their own meetings. So this week, the meetings on the comprehensive plan also include an opportunity to chime in on the Move a Million plan and the big park plan. And the meetings for Move a Million the week of the 19th will include folks from the comprehensive plan folks and the park plan folks, so that you can give your input on all of those things at whatever meeting you choose to attend.
And it also seems like we can do it from the computer, and
there's going to be some online
yes
availability of input as well, and some of these
I love participating last time, so I'm excited to upvote and downvote some stuff.
I emailed you, or I texted you on my way to the meeting last night. It was in your neighborhood.
I know. I was home too. I just forgot.
There. You could have come running right over when I texted you.
Man, you know, I sometimes just want a break.
They had
food.
Know?
I'm about to leave to Oregon, so which is why we're recording on Tuesday. And where are you going this weekend?
I'm going to San Diego. So
for?
My mom and my brother and his family, my niece and my sister-in-law and my stepsister are all going to be in San Diego. And so
2 visits to California in 1 month, eh?
I know. I'll probably be back at least once in November as well.
You know what?
Don't scare people.
Yeah, I won't.
People.
But I will say is, I did find a win while you were also talking, because I do believe, like, we have a sector, and I do miss it. Like, I don't mind getting into the politics and the nitty-gritty and, like, the emotional stuff, because I do think it's interesting, and I do think it's something that the old guard used to just like, oh, we're great here, and we just kind of don't talk about it. But I do miss, like, the economics talking and us talking about, like, businesses and innovation. And I mean, I did find an article recently in a Dallas Business Journal that said California-based technology company Google signed a lease for 1 million square foot warehouse in West Fort Worth, according to real estate data provider CoStar. The warehouse is located in 820 acres Majestic Silver Creek Business Park at Silver Creek Road, directly west of 820. This lease marks Google's second large lease in the area, as the company plans to invest $1 billion in Texas this year to support cloud and data center infrastructure. Majestic, which also handles much of the real estate in Fort Worth Stockyards, announced a plan for the park in 2022. It's also to note here that Dallas-Fort Worth area is a hub for data centers, which I talked about earlier. But these are also 2 leases are among the top 5 largest new leases signed in Texas since the start of the year. So really big win for Fort Worth. Cool. Ann's hanging out in California. Google's moving to Texas. Here we all going, beautiful people. Hope you had a great episode. Look forward to keeping you guys up to date. Continue to have a great week. And again, we forgot to say shout out to Fort Worth Weekly for making us the Critics' Choice for Best Local Podcasts of 2024.